the offlaner's job is kind of subjective, and this is probably the hardest core role's job to pin down because it can kind of encapsulate a lot of things and also encapsulate just one super specific thing given the team, given the game, and given the patch. Here we have some of the offliners in the game that I've seen over the last couple of years. I've kind of tried to fit them into some categories, but the problem is these categories have a lot of like Venn diagramness to them, and there's so much overlap between them that it's hard to just be like, oh, like Beastmaster's just a siege hero, right? I mean, these categories are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll try to go a little in depth. But this hero being here is so hard to be true because he could easily be in the utility category. And the same is true for like so many of these heroes. Like they could all just like, given certain purviews and perspectives, they could be interchanged throughout so many things. But the ideas here are like utility heroes are here to team fight. They're going to try to win their lane. I mean, every offlaner really wants to win their lane. It's really important to the offlane. But the idea with utility heroes is like they're going to buy utility items for the team. They're going to be able to start fights. They're going to be able to counter initiate. They're going to bring a lot of like whatever your team kind of is missing to the team. They're going to be able to help fill in a lot of the gaps. They're going to be able to buy items like Lotus Orb. They're going to be able to carry pipes and Crimson Guards and blah, 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 blah. The siege category of offlaner is just going to try to put pressure on the map with tower pressure. They're rather than trying to force fights with utility, which they still kind of can do. Like Lycan is the best example. He has no disables. He could buy like a Helm of the Overlord and like get a disable through like a creep. But for the most part, the way that Lycan pressures the map, along with DP, they don't have stuns. The way they do it is through like using their spells to put a lot of pressure on the map and force the enemies to have to either like address their pressure or just have to like and just fuck off and do some other thing on the map somewhere else, because like if you're not strong enough to just straight up beat them in a fight, they're gonna force the objective and then take that part of the map, and that in a way is pressure because you force the enemies out of a certain area and into another part of the area just through like presence, or you force them to come to you to just deal with whatever you're trying to do to a tower. Carry offliners are kind of like, I don't even know how to phrase this because carry isn't even the right term, but like you're just filling a really similar role to like your one. A lot of these heroes, like, this is a very Amar kind of playstyle, right? Where you are well, I say the Amar thing because that's a modern example, but realistically this is the Bulldog style. Amar just kind of reinvented it again. But the idea here is that you're going to get a lot of farm from the offlane since you're a side lane, and you're just going to try to use it to be basically like a secondary carry, and you're just going to try to like completely shut down the enemy carry via like timings. Like for instance Razor, you just like shut down the enemy carry and then become like the inverse of him, so you end up kind of being like a pseudo carry position with like Natures and Razor and arguably Lone Druid, Lycan, DK, you know, all these heroes that could interchangeably be played. Beastmaster sort of to a certain extent because he was being played safe lane for a little while, but you get what I'm saying. Like the idea here is like a lot of these heroes could potentially be carries. Arguably, like, the reason Timber's here, I mean, I've seen Timber played safe lane before personally, but the reason Timber's here is because Timber doesn't offer anything to a team but damage, and the way that he brings enemies to him, because it's an important part of the offlane to, like, kind of make the enemies have to deal with you, and to, like, be this, like, really annoying presence in the map. If this video has a theme, it's map pressure. You're aura farming. Offlaners aura farm, right? You're, like, sitting there, and you're just trying to make the enemies come to you in some way. You're trying to, like, just be this big waddling presence or something to like, you just want to make the enemies have to deal with whatever the hell you're doing, whether that be like a Tide Hunter who's going to blink into the entire enemy team and Ravage. My game just crashed. That's staying in, that's funny. Sometimes that means even just like shoving, like you Moo in 2016 playing Beastmaster. Well, back then I know he was technically the 3, but he was like jungling with Iron Talent. But the point is that he was like ratting because he had the siege opportunities, so he was like a push hero. You're filling in your hero is going to fill in the gaps for what your team needs. If you have a very greedy team, the 3 either needs to be somebody who's capable of like really sieging a lot and like also frontlining and peeling for his team and being this like you have a lot of responsibility as the 3. You have to try to discern that through the game given to you. Pubs are kind of, so something to note is like with this video series is this is a lot about how like pros play the game, and a lot of the stuff that happens in these don't necessarily apply to pubs, but it gives you still like a good fundamental understanding of the game to see like what pros are doing and why they're doing it. It's just a little bit hard to be like, oh, well, in your like 2000 MMR pub, you're gonna play Beastmaster and you're going to just constantly push in the bot lane, causing this like domino effect and blah 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 blah. Because like it doesn't necessarily matter in your games because people are just gonna like run into the worst spots on the map, just like feed and die. So like you doing the smart play is like important and good to a certain extent, but like you don't want to get too caught up in it because like it matters more in pro games when people are like making like decisions based around the map rather than just decisions based on like nothing. This video is going to be a little bit less edited. It's kind of just going to be like cut up and have like probably whatever fucking music is thrown in there because I just want to get it out. I'm not going to do as much editing because I think and we're going to see how it goes. If you all hate it, then I'll go back to editing it more, but I want to just try to like get something out because I feel like I'm taking too long in between these episodes. I forgot Bristle. Oh no, Bristle doesn't have any disable, but also he buys like utility items like sometimes, but also sometimes all Bristle does is carry. I don't know, it's a weird, it's terribly. Shut the fuck up. Let's look at a replay really quick. Let's go watch a game of 33, who I think has been probably one of the more prolific offlaners over the last like 4 or 5 years. More, realistically more. What you're going to see 33 doing in this game is going to be utilizing his boars to like pressure the enemy a lot by hitting them, because when boars hit people, they don't draw aggro. So what he's going to be doing is he's going to be like using it to help him CS, trying not to feed them, and also using them to interrupt pulls, and also using them to trade with the enemy support while his support's hitting the enemy support to just like layer on all the pressure. Like literally just having a little boar like gives you all of this like ability to control the space in your lane. As long as you can like not just feed them. And the reason he's running in here now is because he has a really big wave, and he completely shoved basically the reason he did this is he had a double wave. He wasn't just like trying to brute force a kill for no reason. He waited until he got a double wave. He waited until there was like a very weird situation where the Dawnbreaker walked up trying to secure a range creep, and then they punished it with a raptor and then a hawk. Tua. In this game, Tundra's 5 has no disable outside of like Tomb, so they had to pick an offlaner who kind of fit more of a disabled role. Whereas in this game, they have a 4 and a 5 with disable and a mid with a stun, so they could afford to pick a damage dealing too, like Quab. And they also probably wanted a good lane matchup. And this is also another really important thing that I kind of forgot to mention, is lane matchup matters a lot in the offlane. Because you, like, I mean, everybody, lane matchups matter a lot in Dota right now, because the way that Dota ends up going at this current point in time is, like, the lanes snowball into leads so quickly that, like, you really don't want to lose lanes in Dota. It's, like, really not good to lose lanes. You want to really try to, like, CS as best as you can and not give up a lead in laning stage. I'm going to try to stay as focused as possible, but part of that is because in the game with 5 carriers, as soon as you kill somebody, they turn whatever their kill is instantaneously into like some sort of snowball-y item or lead, so it compounds really quickly as soon as you die, so people take a lot less risks in laning than they used to. And laning has become far more about like being a lot safer and more stable than it has in the past. At 5 minutes, there's a cart that's going to spawn, so the support has run down here because Beastmaster is like particularly good at pushing, so they're going to try to force a fight to push this tower down with the siege creep. This is something that's important in games, but at 5 minutes is probably not going to be happening in the average player's game. But it's just important to note that like players at high levels play around these carts, and they try to make things happen with them. And as the offlane, you want to be playing around the siege creeps, particularly at like the 10 to 15 and 20 marks more than any other siege creeps. Those are the most important ones. Like 5 minutes is arguably the most important one because like it's the earliest one, but at the same time it's almost impossible to like get people to coordinate like a push that early into the game without like kind of throwing their own lanes, especially at like lower levels. So I think it's more important to think about the 10, 15, 20-minute carts, because the 10 and 15 ones are going to be the ones that you use to siege the safe lane towers or the mid 2 one. The mid 2 one is also the most important tower in the game still. That hasn't changed, but the mid 2 one is really hard to take successfully without like losing a ton of space on the map. Also, the mid 2 one, like, it doesn't set your carry up for a game. So, like, while it is technically the most important tower in the game because of, like, what it allows the players to control in this sort of area, it doesn't set up your carry. Whereas taking the enemy safe lane T1 gives your carry the opportunity to, if he's having a bad game, move down here and just, like, sort of farm this whole area. So he gets these ancients, all this stuff, and you can kind of either farm in here, play towards your mid after you take this, or you can stay bottom and just keep shoving in the lane to the T2 if you really did well in your lane, and you can bring the enemies away from your carry. And this is important. What you want to try to do is offlane, like I was talking about earlier, is bring the enemies to you and away from your carry so that your carry gets the opportunity to play the game. You want to be playing with your 2 because your 2 is also going to be wanting generally to find kills, not just like farm as well with your carry. Like generally your 2 is going to be wanting to be like farming but also part of the action. So you're going to want to be trying to set up opportunities for kills to happen, give your supports somebody to play with by being a person who creates a lot of action happening on the map. It's stuff like this that ends up creating big leads. One little thing that ends up being a big thing, this is, I don't know where to fit this into the video in terms of structure, but this is something that matters a lot, is if you have a very good laning stage and you like completely stomp it and you're just sitting down here like sieging and trying to like push and you have complete free farm, one of the most like optimized things you can do for like pushing this tower is, well, one, trying to keep your card alive by tanking it, but also if this wave is coming in like this and nobody were down here and you were playing this off lane, what you would want to do is you want to catch this wave and run into the small camp and then farm the small camp in this wave and then catch the next wave and bring that into the hard camp and then farm both those waves and the hard camp all at the same time, because nothing's guarding this tower, no one's coming down here, you're sieging the tower and you're farming all of this at the same time. It is like insane min-maxy, and that will give you like a huge lead if you're playing offlane. That's just like a small little tip, but you also could die doing it because you are running in between a tower with nobody else down here and you're dragging this wave. High risk, high reward though in a way. But after this T1 dies, I would like to reiterate, this is going to become the next objective, or this. And this is going to be a lot harder to take, this T2. The enemy safe lane T2 is going to be a lot harder to take than the enemy mid T1 in terms of just like difficulty. But you coming down here opens up a lot of space for your team, but you do run the risk of like feeding your lead. So you playing with your team is generally going to be a safer option. But if you're a hero like Beastmaster, all you have to do is like farm the jungle next to it and like throw your boars down this lane and keep it super shoved in, and then you could kind of like rotate up here if it looks like your team's trying to siege it and just kind of play in this area after you take this T1. Farm the lane with your boar, etc. Heroes with summons do sort of have a lot more options than like a pit lord who just like walks down here, like queues the wave, then like walks over here, queues a camp, then walks back the wave. Like, micro heroes have a lot of options to them, but the downside of a lot of the micro heroes is once the game goes long enough and they can kill your summons, your hero kind of falls off really hard. So you end up hoping more so that your team can do a lot with your lead rather than you, or that you personally can end the game really quickly. Okay, if you have a really hard lane matchup, I'm sorry this video is so scatterbrained. Maybe this is a mistake. I'm just gonna put it out anyway though, fuck it. But if you have like an impossible matchup, like let's say you are Timbersaw against an Ursa, what you're gonna want to like do or be aware of doing, and this is honestly more for your 4 than you, but okay, this is more for your 4 than you. But what you will probably want to either do or have your 4 do, probably your 4. Realistically, it's always going to preferably be your 4 who does this. But what you want to do is have somebody run in between these towers. And you can't do it on the first wave. I just started the game with cheats, so it's like, you know. But you can't do it on first wave. First wave never gets aggro. But second, third, fourth, fifth, every other wave subsequently, you can walk in between these towers, get aggro from this creep, and you can walk them around like this. You hit it so they don't lose vision, and then you take it in between this tower. Or if you're on Dire, You grab it here, you run it like this, and you run it in front of the tower, because getting it in behind this tower is really hard with all these. Well, maybe you can nowadays. I think it's really hard with these trees, but I think it's better to do it in front of the tower with Dire right now. I don't know if this map will change. Oh, this terrain's broken. I don't know if this will change in the future, but for the current patch and the current time being, I'm pretty sure it's better if you drag it here. I will show you how dragging is done. This is also way more for 4s, like I said, but it is in your lane as the offlane that this is going to be happening, so it's important to know how it works and what you want to do if it happens. What you're probably going to want to do if this happens in your game is the 4 is going to drag the wave, and that 4 is going to take it here, and they're going to want to deny the entire creep wave, and you're going to want to try to like farm the wave that you have and let your 4 kind of do this. Uh-oh. This will end up pulling your wave back though over the course of like over the course of a couple of waves. This will end up pulling your wave back. The enemy 5 should also follow him, so what'll end up it'll be really fucking weird, but you'll have like a 5 over here and like your 4 over here trying to farm this wave, and you'll be against your carry farming this lane or something, like keep aggroing the creeps back towards your tower while your 4 tries to deny this whole wave behind the tower. And if the enemy 1 is like trying really hard, he'll just like tank the wave and run around in circles and try to double wave himself, so, or try to wait for your wave to crash so that he can deny as many of his creeps with your extra remaining wave, so that it like evens out at the end. But that's just sometimes how the offlane goes. This role's really weird. Going into the mid game and coming out of the laning stage, going into the mid game is going to be kind of subjective. It depends on a lot of things, just like every other core video, and why I don't super go too in depth, because at the end of the day, like all you can try to do is like push out your waves, not let your waves get too close to you. Try to prioritize playing if you're like fire this part of the map, and like if you're radiant this part of the map. Giving your carry the most farm, giving your mid the second most farm, and you take the dangerous farm as the offlane. That's important in the game because you're gonna probably be one of the harder heroes to kill. Also, it's gonna take them probably a lot of resources, so it's your job as the offlane to like take the dangerous farm on the map. But you also still need to be ready to fight. Something you'll notice offlaners do in higher MMR is they like just don't TP till, I mean, most people shouldn't be TPing, especially to tier 2s, but they will, offlaners especially, won't TP like after like 7 minutes or something, like to their own lane. Like once they have their ulti, they won't really just TP back unless it's like a massive wave that they're catching, because you want to have your, like you'll die, you'll walk back, because you want to have your TP up to join any fight that could happen anywhere on the map. Even if you're supposed to have your team be playing around you and stuff, like it's still like nice to have your TP up so you can join any fight that happens anywhere on the map, because pubs are weird and random, and you'll have heroes like Dawnbreaker, who their whole thing is that they want to be like playing kind of a Spectre style, where you're playing away from your team, splitting a lane, but that ends up being this double-edged sword, because you're playing away from your team so that you could join with your ulti, but the enemies basically always are going to come kill you because you're playing alone at all times, since you're just shoving waves, and also they can't fight into your ulti, so you're just this like, it's just, you know. The mid and late game for you is going to be probably either about initiating or counter-initiating, and this is going to be something that's very hard to just explain as like in theory, because in theory, X could be like the perfect initiator. You just blink, call people, and sometimes he is. Sometimes he's the perfect counter-initiator. It's just one of these things where you're going to end up having to feel it out based on your draft and based on what your team needs. Sometimes it is going to be your job, like in my most recent Axe game that I still lost. It was a sort of impossible situation, and this is going to exemplify part of why I think you can't pick heroes like this in the mid lane anymore, because in this game, when we look at the enemy draft and we look at our heroes, none of our heroes can jump these two heroes in the back, but these two heroes in the back basically need to die every single fight. So my responsibility is now, I have to save my offlaner, or I have to save my supports and my mid laner from the insane amount of dive they have between Centaur, Lifesteal, and Ember, and also somehow try to jump them back because anytime we try to kill anybody, they're going to get saved with a global and a Oracle Call. Basically, the fights are literally impossible because I don't have a mid laner, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to point out to you that like the responsibility of like what an offlaner is and can do is going to sort of be very fluctuant dependent on the draft and dependent on what your team needs and what the enemy team has. So like in this situation, it's a lot about we need to kill these guys before the fight starts, but I also have to somehow save my entire backline. You know what I'm saying? This is like a perfect example of like an offlaner being spread too thin. There's no perfect way to do this. And this is why the meta has sort of shaken out to be the way that it is and being so constraining, because there's very little variance in what is allowed to be done nowadays. You have very specific things that have to happen in very certain ways. And even while you can pick a Lycan offlane and siege, what the Lycan is probably going to be doing in team fights is diving the backline in the same way that like an Axe is going to dive the backline, or in the same way that a Sand King might dive the backline or something. Like, a lot of the things, I mean, okay, small vent, but people on Reddit will be like, supporting back in the day, you were just a ward bot. A, that's not true. B, that is so telling of like what your skill level of support was back in the day. And C, the offlaner's job is to still insta-kill you before the fight even begins. That is still the exact same as it always has been. You can't just play Silencer, buy fucking like 6 fluffy hats, and then be like, why am I dying? Like, you're still, like, everyone's going to try to kill you before the fight even begins. That's the whole thing about these heroes, like Oracle, Dazzle, Silencer. They need to die instantly, because if they get their spells off, the game is impossible for the enemy team to play. That doesn't change. That doesn't change, Mr. Redditor. That's the same. But instead, now, like, they're insanely power crept, so, like, I don't know, whatever. I am still a little bit bitter about it. I'm doing my best here, though. My main point basically being is that in the late game, what the offlaner's purpose and job is going to be a lot about target prioritization and utility, in the sense of like, who do I need a Lotus? If I'm buying a Linken's, who am I putting the Linken's on? Is it my carry? Is there a Doom in the enemy game, or is there a Bat Rider, or in the enemy game? Is there a Doom or a Bat Rider on the enemy team, and I am responsible for like making sure that they don't get lassoed or doomed? Is it like Linken's on them, or Lotus on them? We need Lotuses for Purge, Linken's to prevent these big spells, like, do I need to go Crimson because the entire enemy team is they're like Crimson AC because they're entirely physical damage and I need to carry these ores so my team stops dying? Do I need to go AC just so we can siege? Do I need to, like, you have to try to figure out what it is that your team lacks and try to insert like what it is that they lack into your team. Like, do we need catch? I need to go like blink drums so that we can catch people, or like drums blink or something. I mean, right now basically all you do is buy Blade Mail on just about every single offlaner. So current meta is like a terrible example, but I think generally speaking, the theory behind offlane is what I've just explained. In case Dota ever moves back to this, I'm gonna cover some tri-lane things, because I would like this to be independent of patches. I don't think Dota will ever move back to tri-lanes anymore. I hope they do, but I don't think they will. But either way, I'll cover it as best as I can. So in the tri-lane era of Dota, this is probably going to be the most dense part of this video because this is actually one of the more complicated facets of the game. In the tri-lane era of Dota, your goal as the offlaner was far less to just be an early game timing core and to be a core that would come basically fill in the gaps for your team, kind of like how I mentioned with the utility thing. But you would see lots of heroes be played offlane back in this day and age, like Funnick with offlane Bounty Hunter and offlane Clinks. You could argue Seb with like offlane Ench and offlane Treant Protector, but that was also somewhat in the dual lane era. But that was like still like half and half. But what you would notice a lot of offlaners do back in the day is they would try to use the map in a way where they could hide in the trees. In fact, I'm gonna pull something up here. I'll just show you how it used to. Oh fuck, I forgot my auto exec changed the colors. Side note, man, what a good item. It'd be a real shame if players couldn't figure out why their hero was blocking damage anymore, huh? You'll notice how wide the lanes are, first and foremost, I think. Back in the day, you had this huge nest of trees on either sort of, well, kind of in here, but it was a bit different. You would have to, like, some players would unironically do shit like this before the game would start. Oh, I missed that. I actually missed that. I wish they would bring that back. This is that little cooldown indicator over your mouse. That's awesome. What the hell? A lot of offlane players would do shit like this back in the day, and they would sit around and they would like let the wave crash here, and they would leech the EXP in the trees like this. Another thing that they would do is they would stand next to their ranged creep, because back in the day it was tri-lanes, and look at where this hard camp is. You can't pull for yourself in this lane. How could you do that? You could drag the wave like this and double wave and triple wave yourself, but then you'd probably end up dying. So like what people would do is they would like let the waves crash like this. Oh, so that creep blocking, look at where it meets. That's crazy. So what people would do is they'd stand next to their ranged creep. And if I were to get autoed, because one of them would have been a ranged hero, if I were to get auto attacked, these ranged creeps would stop hitting this wave and they would start hitting whoever was harassing me. And I would kind of try to like position myself at the max end of the attack range so that they would have to really get in here. Maybe I could even draw aggro. Maybe I could force them to draw aggro from my melee creeps if I'm lucky. But they would probably be trying to walk far away and try to hit me. And then realistically, it would be kind of weird. They'd get one on me, and then these two would only draw because they would be hitting me from far away, because they'd probably be good players too. But what you would do is stuff like that, and then the creeps would stop hitting my enemy's wave, and they'd hit the enemy who was hitting me, and then over the next couple of waves, I'd guarantee myself like 2 or 3 waves. Because, like, that small amount of damage would add up, and then I would get a couple of waves, and stuff like that was way more important. And if the offlane ever deviates back to you trying to be clever, what you would notice a lot of people do back in the day is they would just like try to get what they can, and if the wave ever got this far and it's like this time, they would run over here, they'd stack the ancients really quick, then they'd run back the lane. Or even back in the day, back when the map was shaped, like it had this the Roche was here, and it had this big divot here, and this is where the ancients were. They would play Beastmaster, run over here, throw axes, stack this, run back, or you would see Funnick on Clinks. You'd play Clinks or Bounty Hunter and use his invis and run around and sap the EXP from the pulls by like sitting here invis and then run over and catch the wave still. Like back in the day, you had to be really clever and really, it was such a cool role. I know that like this isn't supposed to be like one of these kinds of videos, but I do miss this. I think this was really cool and really fun and really interesting, and I thought it was much more interesting than whatever it is today. But the point isn't right now for me to just like shit on like the current game. It's more just to try to give you like the information in case the game ever slides back down to this sort of style of offlane. Again, doubt it will, but here's the information if you decide like for whatever reason you're 5-stack that you want to try doing like a solo offlane thing with a tri-lane setup where you're like 1-4 is just zoning the enemy offlaner, and your 5 is stacking the small camp and pulling off cooldown, and your 5 is zoning, your 4 is stacking this, farming it, pulling it off cooldown without missing a single one. And your 1 and you have like a 4 undying or a 5 undying, and your 1 and your 5 undying are just doing that while somebody pulls and your offlane tries to soak as much as he can or something. Like, there's the information. Do with it what you will. This is good. This was like a weirder video because I wanted to try just to focus on like getting something out rather than like being overly thorough. Let me know if it sucked. If it sucked, I'll just go back to the way that I was doing it previously. I'm still just trying out different formats and styles and stuff, see what works, see what doesn't, see what's like the easiest mix of like what is easiest for me to do and also what is like received the best. I have another channel just called Sevil where I do variety stuff, not just Dota stuff. Whatever.